There we go. While Aaron does that, I will introduce myself, even though probably most of you have already seen me introduce myself. I'm Susan Bronson. I'm the Executive Director of the Yiddish Book Center. And I've been here now for 12 years.
Seems like yesterday,
Seems like
Susan.
yesterday.
Yeah. And I am Aaron Lansky, and I am the president and founder of the Yiddish Book Center. And I should probably start out by saying that Susan and I have offices maybe 15 feet apart or so, and we spend an awful lot of every working day talking to one another. Nonetheless, we were thrilled to agree to talk here too. So
yeah, we thought it would be great to have a conversation, and it would be a very nice way for us to sort of update you on everything that's going on and everything that's coming up. And I guess I just want to say, first of all, how many of you have been here for the entire weekend? Oh, some of you, not all of you. Well, I think it's been an incredible weekend. I hope you agree. It's just been thrilling for us to be able to host everybody in person again for Yidstock. It feels like a celebration. I know the musicians and artists feel like it's coming home, and it just couldn't be better to have you all here and for us to be together. It feels like we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. As much as we love connecting with everybody near and far on Zoom, this is what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So
we don't actually love connecting on Zoom.
Well,
it's better than nothing.
Yes, and not only that. I mean, this I guess is a segue to the first thing I wanted us to discuss today, because I think, as terrible and stressful and and we're still not done with this pandemic, as stressful and horrible as it's been, I think we've learned a lot of lessons that we didn't know we needed to learn, and I think we've come out of it stronger than we might have imagined, and I think it's bringing us to places we didn't think we needed to go. And so, I thought we should just say a few words about sort of how the pandemic has brought us to a new place as an organization. Yeah,
well, as I suggested last night, the pandemic is clearly an inflection point in human history. There have been many events in history that suddenly something very catastrophic happens and the world changes as a result of that. And I think this will prove to have a similar kind of impact. And some of the changes, the superficial ones, we're going to work at home. That's easy. The much deeper changes are just beginning to emerge in all sorts of ways. And one of them has been the fact that we've been able to marshal all the resources of online access and kind of put them to our, to use them to get our word out much more widely than we had before. So for example, we were way, way, way ahead of the whole world in digitizing Yiddish books and making them accessible. But that meant the day that we closed our doors, for everyone in the world who was accessing our books online, that was invisible. They didn't care if the doors were open or locked. What do they care?
I remember Aaron saying, "Oh, this is, it's terrible. We're closing the doors." I said, we've spent years creating online resources and online access. For most people, they don't even know our doors are closed. They're reaching us. They're connecting with our resources. They're using us in the same way that they have. And we were also able to pivot in some important ways. How many of you have been enjoying our virtual public programs over the last 2 years? Hopefully, good.
That's great.
A good number of you. And those of you who haven't, if you're not already on our email list, you can sign up. So we've been doing, weekly, bi-weekly virtual public programs on a whole range of topics, which have, attracted hundreds and even thousands of people. I mean, Aaron, the first one that we did, I think, was a telling story. Yeah,
the first one started out as a real program, and then we had to pivot and turn on a dime and make it into an online program. If it had been up to me and Susan, I don't think we would have gotten very far, but fortunately we had younger people on the staff who knew immediately how to make all that happen. And the program was, even by our standards, it was particularly obscure. It was, I always get this wrong, but I think it was 6 different translations of a 7-line poem by Aaron Seitlin, but it might have been the other way around in terms of the 6 and the 7. Whatever it was, we weren't exactly going to be packing them in here. We weren't going to have the Amherst police outside for that. This was really an easy one. And we couldn't do it. The pandemic came, and that Sunday we couldn't run. It was actually the following week. We couldn't run the program. But they managed to put it up, our staff managed to put it up online. And as soon as it was over, I called one of the staff members. How many people did we have? I'm thinking 20, 30, 920 something.
900 people. For a poem, for a program about translating Yiddish poetry. So that was, you know, that blew our minds. And immediately we basically said, you know, we've got to do this every week, especially right now.
Right.
And we, you know, Lisa Newman, who's, you know,
Is Lisa here?
No, she's not
She
here.
is there. Lisa, stand up
Oh,
for 1
Lisa.
second. She
Yay.
needs a round of applause because
So, you know, Lisa was like, you know, I'll do it. So we started organizing these virtual public programs. I think, you know, what's happened is over the course of 2 years, you know, our email list was 25,000 people going into the pandemic. It has basically doubled from 25 to over 50,000 people thanks to the virtual public programs. People signing on, people connecting with us. For years, I would travel around the country to meet with donors. People would say, when are you going to come to Florida, to Chicago, to LA, wherever I was? Suddenly, we were coming to them. And you know,
everybody,
doing it in a way where we could connect with our membership and build new audiences in a way that we really didn't think was possible.
Right. So if you look at the wall behind you there, see the little projector booth there?
Mm-hmm.
See those things on either side of the glass? Those are cameras that allow us to do streamed programs, what they call hybrid programs. So we can now have public programs here exploring all sorts of in-depth aspects of Yiddish literature, Jewish culture, but we can also record them and stream them out live at the same time. So this is quite revolutionary. Instead of having 45 people or 50 people for a weekend program, we can share it with thousands around the world. And exactly the same thing was true of the books. You know, I said the access to the books was absolutely uninterrupted, but it doubled. So maybe you could say people had nothing else to do during the pandemic. They were reading Yiddish books. But I think they really just kind of discovered this, you know, in all sorts of ways. And the number of readers is just staggering. We're over 5 million at this point, 5 million downloads of full-length Yiddish books. You know, if you had told me, you know, 15 years ago when we came up with the idea of digitization we'd have those kind of numbers, I would have thought it was, you know, risible, it was inconceivable. But that changed totally, and it's true of just about everything we're doing right now, right?
Yeah, I think, so I will pivot to education, but just to stick with the books for a few more minutes. I mean, so in addition to all the stuff that was happening online, I know Aaron mentioned last night, briefly, for those of you who were at last night's concert, that we were flooded with book donations. I mean, I think, you know, Aaron has said for years, you know, we think it's going to stop. Like, how many more books are out there? How many more books are we going to get? Well, you know...
I didn't say I think it's going to stop. I got up in front of the board for every board meeting for like 20 years and say, I think we did it.
Yeah, right.
I think we're done. You know, I think we finally did it.
But
it hasn't
you
happened.
know,
Yeah.
did not happen. And in fact, during the pandemic, I mean, it was crazy. The entire performance hall that you've just been sitting in for the concerts literally covered in boxes of books. When we started, when we had to reopen, it was a crazy process to organize them. But yeah.
So, yeah, it's a lot of books, and you know, we have the books you see out there. That's like 2% of our collection, and then we have an underground book repository right behind us here, where we have several 100,000 books stored. But we also have a not to wax too Dick Cheney here, but we have a secure, undisclosed location not too far from here, where we have hundreds of thousands of books stored in boxes on pallets in a computerized way, and it's a forklift operation, and that's kind of long-term storage. So there are an awful lot of books have come in here. But the fact that after all that, the books could still come, that was amazing. And Susan, I have to just say one other thing, you know, that we really were not in a position to, you know, go out and get books. And I was sure, you know, when the pandemic began that this is it, you know, we can't go out there, we can't find the books. But they started coming, you know, every day, FedEx, Post Office, UPS, it was like a little parade every day. And they'd back up to the loading dock, and we had no touch-free, you know, there was no interaction with them. And then we'd bring them into the building, and the piles just got higher and higher and higher. But
and
many people...
we were getting a shipment. We got a shipment
sure, yeah, right.
from Australia, I believe, from... where else did we get a big shipment from? I'm trying to recall.
Oh, well, there was a big library in Boston.
Yeah, I mean, we got
3,000 volumes
massive
from one
shipments
library.
of books.
Yeah. And so this was kind of amazing, but it was very touching also, because a lot of people started calling us. Is Suzanne here? My assistant?
No.
Yeah, Suzanne Rubenstein is the one who actually takes the calls. We had set this all up in advance. We kind of saw it was coming, so people could actually answer the phone, you know, from their own houses. And Suzanne, who usually takes these calls when people have books, she told me that, you know, on an average week, she might get, at this stage, before the pandemic, 3 to 5 calls a week. And she was getting 3 to 5 calls a day, and then soon more than that even. And people really wanted to talk. So the average call used to take 5 minutes. Now it's taking over an hour for every call. Because you're stuck at home. Yes, I mean, after all, we're a talkative people. What can I say, you know? But people would call and they'd say, I have books here that I inherited from my grandfather. I have books that I inherited from my parents. But these books are too valuable and I don't want to trust them to FedEx. So I want to bring them to you. And we would very patiently explain. We said, you know, that's lovely, but we can't let you in the building. We're really sorry, but, you know, we're completely quarantined here and we can't open the doors. And we can't even let you use the bathroom if you come. So it doesn't matter. The books are too important. I'm coming. And they would drive here. And David Mazower, our bibliographer, would meet them out in the parking lot. And, you know, when it's 10 degrees outside here in New England, and people would offload the books, and David would bring them into the building. It was an act of trust on the part of the people who brought them. But it was also an act of faith on their part that they saw continuity was possible, and they saw the books would have a home, and they saw that, you know, don't forget, every book that gets donated here, if it hasn't been digitized already, it gets scanned and digitized, and suddenly the whole world has access to it. Susan, I just want to tell that one other story about the Chicago books. Remember that? Yeah. One day we got a shipment of books from a shul. I can't remember the town. Something just north of Chicago. Like, it wasn't Glencoe, but one of those towns up there. And I happened to be there that day, and David was here, and I think there were 2 other people around. And we opened up the box, and the first box we opened up, like my jaw dropped. There was a translation of Yiddish poetry by women called Yiddish Dichterin, Yiddish women poets. And it was edited by a man named Ezra Corman, who lived in Chicago. And he had put this book together in 1928. And unlike most Yiddish books that were done by anarchist and socialist presses, they were very low-budget affairs. This one was beautifully printed, thick, decal-edged paper, and every one of the women who were in it, these poets, had a photograph of them literally, they call it tipped in, like literally stuck into the book, but a real photograph stuck in for each of the writers. It was in beautiful typography. It was just a magnificent book. And in all these years, I think maybe we'd found 4 copies of this book. And here's a copy, and it's in pristine condition. And David says, wait a minute, let's see what else is in here. And we started unpacking it. By the time we finished, there were 6 pristine condition copies of this book. And so we called up the shul and asked them, you know, where they had come from. They didn't know. But David and I agreed we would do a Zoom presentation for the members of the shul to explain what the books were that they had just donated to us. And people were thrilled, and they were awed, and they were really delighted until someone raised their hand virtually and said, wait a minute. If these books are so valuable, why are we sending them to you? You know? Yeah. At which point I explained, don't worry, when you send the book to us, millions of people have access to it, and they were assuaged by that, I think. And so, but it's been very exciting in every way.
Yeah.
Right?
So I'm gonna segue from the physical books that we're getting into the topic. You know, we made a lot of progress during the pandemic. We have all these new friends and members, and but I thought I'd segue to sort of talking about what's next and what are the big stories that are coming up. What are the things that we're doing? And with regard to the book, I want to talk about a project that we've had in the works for some time that I think, you know, we're really getting close to an implementation stage, and that is the Universal Yiddish Library. And I'll let you kind of tell the story of that, and then I'll kind of tell people where we're at with that.
But I'm going to preface that story.
Of course.
Before I tell you the story about yet another, you know, very, very large, gargantuan kind of project that we call Rizika Arbeit, a gigantic project that we're undertaking, I just want to tell you that August of the pandemic, the first August of the pandemic, we did release our new Yiddish textbook in Einem, this magnificent 2-volume textbook. And that, when Asya first came to us with the idea of that textbook, Susan and I thought, sounds like a good idea. And we said, how long will it take? And I think she said a year, right?
Yeah,
said,
we thought
maybe
a year.
2, maybe 2. 8 years later, it finally came out. But when it did finally come out, it took the world by storm. It's now being used in just about every college Yiddish classroom in the world right now. And that was kind of in the middle of a pandemic. So that was pretty astonishing.
Yeah, we've sold, I think like 1,500 copies to date and growing. So that's a
Yeah.
really exciting development, and more to talk about Yiddish education. But I want to go
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
books.
we are. So now,
Yeah.
now we're going to go.
Universal Yiddish Library. Let's talk about the Universal Yiddish Library.
So our dream has always been, when I first started the book center, when I was like this young guy, in an empty factory loft in Northampton, and reporters would come and they would see all these books there, and they would, we're always a little bit skeptical about all of this. And yeah, okay, this is great, but who's going to read the books, And I certainly understood there was enough intrinsic value to these books that they would one day be read. But I didn't exactly know by whom or where or any of that. That was impossible to predict. But in fact, demand has grown consistently, steadily over the years. And then I have to go back a little bit. We ended up digitizing the book, starting thanks to the help of a great many of you. That goes back maybe close to 20 years now, I think. And once again, we were way, way, way ahead of the curve, and we started scanning the books. We had a factory operation going on through a company called Danker outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And for 4 years, they worked 3 shifts a day scanning the books. Back in those days, you literally had to slice the spine off the book to feed them through this special scanning machine. But we managed to get a great deal of the literature available. And then another young person on our staff came to us and said, hey, I think the internet's fast enough you could put these books online now and make them available. Well, that was really mind-blowing. So first we talked to Google. That went nowhere. And then eventually we were sent out to talk with the Internet Archive, a nonprofit group in San Francisco. And the head of that group, Bruce DeKale, this computer genius who'd put all his own money into this first to take snapshots of the internet and then to make the world's books available online. And when he did that, it was pretty amazing because the books went up. By the way, I said to him, how long would it take to get our books online? They'd already been scanned. He said, I can have these all up online in 2 weeks. 2 years later, it finally happened. Why did it take so long? Anyone have a guess? What's that? Yes, the Hebrew font. Actually, they were kind of bitmapped images, so that wasn't the problem in and of itself. But what was the problem? They didn't realize that Yiddish went from, I have to get this right to left instead of left to right. I'm facing the audience, so I'm trying to, yeah. Right to left instead of left to right. They didn't quite know that, and it took 2 years for a pro bono programmer at Oracle to reprogram the whole thing and make it work. But they finally did that. Books went up online. We didn't know how many downloads we were getting at that point. And I saw in the paper that Brewster was giving a talk at Harvard. So I texted or emailed him, I guess, and said, hey, any chance we could have dinner after your talk? He says, yeah, sure. So we have dinner in some nice restaurant in Cambridge. It was at nighttime. It was Christmas time, and all the twinkly lights are on outside, and it was snowing and quite beautiful, and we have a nice meal. And we finished. I said, okay, how many downloads have we had? And he says, just a minute, let me check. And he pulls out of his briefcase this gigantic MacBook computer. And then he's gone. He's just typing away furiously. For 20 minutes, he's typing, and he comes up with the answer. I don't remember exactly, but it was something like 240-something thousand downloads. And I almost fell off my chair because, we had never expected anything remotely like that. Well, those numbers just kept growing and growing and growing. And as I said before, we've now had something over 5 million downloads of these books. This is full-length books that somebody downloads and puts onto their own computer to read it or prints it. And that doesn't count all the people who are reading those books online, so it's even more still. But we also knew there were a lot of books that we don't have. We've collected a gazillion books here, but we don't have every title. And don't forget, a lot of our collection took place in the United States, in Canada, Mexico. There were many, many books that, in Israel they had very different books, and in the Soviet Union certainly very different books still. So we realized that we needed partners in all of this. And it took a while to get people to kind of realize this was a good idea to work together. There's an old expression in Yiddish, they say, Jeder macht Shabbos für sich. Everybody makes Shabbos by themselves. And that was kind of the ethos of the Jewish organizational world for a long time. I'm sorry to have to report this. But we figured, it's a new generation coming along, and the simple fact of the matter is, it's too expensive for everybody to make Shabbos by themselves. It's a lot easier if you do it together. And so we started talking to people, and Susan and I spoke to the leaders of several organizations in the United States. So geholfen via Teutenbankers. We got nowhere with that. But then we got the idea, maybe we ought to talk to people in Israel, because they're really sophisticated with technology, and they're kind of the brains behind Microsoft anyways, and we ought to talk to them. So we went to a conference on digitization in New York, and the head of the National Library of Israel was there. And we went out to breakfast with him, and we explained our idea of, hey, would you like to work with us to put all of your collection on along with our collection? Of course, why not, you know? So while this conference was going on, everybody was talking about digitizing. We kind of sealed the deal to make this thing happen. And we've now brought in YIVO and the New York Public Library as well. And there are two other very major libraries that are very eager to join with us as soon as we're ready technologically. And we're now developing, through a brilliant member of our own staff, Amber Clooney, to develop the infrastructure for this whole project. And the idea is that we'll pool our collective resources, all of our collective digital assets, and put them all together in kind of a virtual library. For the end user, it'll be invisible what collection it comes from. It doesn't matter. But what the main point is, there'll be a single search for all of them, and you'll be able to search through all of these holdings from all of these institutions. And between the four of us, we think we have something like 97%, I think, is the estimate of all the Yiddish books that have been published. So this is of all titles, you know, this is a very, very big deal. And then in case that wasn't enough, while all this was happening, also out of the blue, this is 6 years ago, 7 years ago now, I got an email from a man named Asaf Urieli, who identified himself as a computational linguist. This is a profession. And he said he was born in South Africa, he was raised in Israel, he was trained in the United States. He now lived in the French Pyrenees with his wife, who was half Jewish and half Armenian, right? Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
And they had two adopted kids from Russia, so don't ask, you know. But he said he had single-handedly developed OCR, the kind of technology that allows you to make a text file out of a bitmapped image. And all this became ready at the same time, and so we ended up posting all our books online. And we then posted this new technology that allowed searchability. You can now go onto our website, and through this program, it's called Joker, you can, something like Java, something or other, something, you can type in any Yiddish word, a name, a family name, a place name, a term, a subject, Zionism, Bundism, anything you want, you can type into the computer. And within about 3 seconds, it'll search through about 10 million pages of Yiddish literature. And every time that word appears, it pops up on your screen. You know, bring you the text of it will come right onto your screen of the original text. So this was such an unbelievable revolution. 2 weeks before the pandemic hit, I went to a conference in New York City. It was honoring the new film about a book by my friend Sam Castle about the Oynik Shabbos archive. And Agi Lutko, who was the Yiddish professor at Columbia, was sitting next to me that night. And I barely knew her, and she said to me, I want you to know, she's a very warm person, she said, I want you to know that because of you, I haven't slept for the last 2 weeks. So I got very flattered by this, and really. And she said, no. She says, as soon as the online searchability came on, she said, everything I ever wanted to know about Yiddish literature that would have taken me 30 years to find was suddenly at my fingertips. And she's been staying up every single night doing these searches and finding out all these things. And I think a lot of people were. Then the pandemic came. Everybody was at it. So our partners are very excited with tools like that we can give them access to for free. And with a single unified access, it's really going to revolutionize the whole access to Yiddish literature. And really, this is the honest to God's truth that you know, Yiddish, which when we began was one of the most endangered literatures on earth, will now be the very first literature in human history to be fully accessible online. Every book just about will be available. Yeah. So, and Susan, when is that all going to be finished?
Well, we're in the midst, probably in the next couple of years it will finally happen. We're in the midst of a final stages of fundraising. We are going to be working with CogApp. This is a web design firm that's based in England that has designed the search for our existing website. They're going to be working with our staff to design the interface. So there's a lot of work yet to be done, but we are really, I mean, it's been years that we've been working on this project, and we are really, I would say we're in the home stretch. But for us, the home stretch is a couple of years. So, you know,
and I want to just say, Susan, we're not, neither of us is quite as young as we once were, but we are undaunted by a project that's got years to go.
Still young. Speak for yourself. Stop calling me old.
You know, for years my name in the Yiddish world was Der Junge Mann. I know. Nobody's called me that for a while, but I still like the idea.
So, you know, don't be surprised if you get one of these appeal letters from Aaron. we're going to have matching. We expect to be getting a big matching grant opportunity to fund the final phase of this. But really, I think we're really in the home stretch, and before long, you will see it happen, and it really will be transformational. So I'm going to segue.
Go.
I'm the segue person to the next topic, which I think really flows quite naturally from the books, which is, okay, we've got all these books online in Yiddish. That's great. What about all of us who can't read the original Yiddish? And this has been, something that we've also been working on for many years. We know, we're dedicated to Yiddish education, and, the textbook, of course, is amazing, and we want the next generation to learn Yiddish, but many people won't, and we want to open up those books, all these Yiddish books, for people who are never going to read the Yiddish.
Right,
So
right.
we launched a big translation initiative.
Yeah, and 10 years ago, I guess, we held it. You were here already when we had that big
was here.
conference. Yeah.
Yeah.
So somewhere between 12 years ago and now,
Yeah.
we had a big conference here, and we invited all the world's, prominent Yiddish translators and scholars, and we all met in the big hall there. I think over 100 people showed up to figure out what needs to be done. What do we do in order to get more than 2% of Yiddish literature translated into English? And at that point, we'd had a project for 10 years at Yale University Press that we were partners to translate Yiddish literature. We were doing a book a year with that project, and I thought that was just great, until one day I sat down with our fellows, and the fellows are 22, 23, 24. I sat down with them, I said, well, we have this project at Yale University Press, and every year for the past 10 years, we've put out a new Yiddish translation. And I thought that was cool, and one of them, the young guy, looked at me, he gave me that look that my daughters give me all the time. And he said, you realize at the rate of a book a year, you got 39,000 years to go. So Susan and I might not be that old, but there is a limit here, So we realized we had to find another way of doing it. I said to this young guy, so how would you do it? He says, I'd wiki it, like Wikipedia, give everybody a crack at it. That was overstating the case, but his idea was correct. The only way to do this, you couldn't rely on, 3 people in their 80s to do the translating. You had to open this up in some way. So I went to several scholars I know and suggested, can we start training a new generation of translators? And 2 people said to me, that's impossible. I know so much, nobody else could ever learn this, Great. So you stay home and know so much. But in the meantime, another scholar who was had a much longer view of things said, of course, it's the only way to do this. So we started this program to train a new generation.
Right.
We've now trained about 80-something people.
Yeah, we've had 80 people, more than 80 people go through the fellowship. And what's fascinating about this is when we started it, we thought, okay, year 1, we got a lot of applicants for the fellowship. And we have about 8 to 12 a year, it depends on the year. We thought, okay, at some point, how many people are going to apply to a fellowship to translate Yiddish books? Well, here we are, a decade later. Every year, we get a crop of great applications for people to translate Yiddish books. And I would say that not only are we training a new generation of translators, but we're seeding the idea that this is something you want to do. And we're inspiring a new generation of translators. And we're creating a community of a new generation of translators. And again, I think this happens in ways, what I love to see is that the fruits of this are things we didn't imagine when we started it. We think, okay, we're going to train some translators and they're going to translate some books. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had 2 cohorts of translators here because for the last couple of years it's been hard to bring them here. We've done the program virtually, so we brought last year's cohort and this year's together. And they were doing readings and they were here, and the energy, I can't even tell you, it's just incredible, the excitement in that group. And of course, they're not all 25-year-olds. These are people, some of them, Zachary Schollenberger, who's was one of our fellows, he's a doctor in his day job.
He's more than a doctor. He's a professor of medicine at Hopkins.
Professor of medicine,
right,
and, but he also translates Yiddish books on the side, and he
Right.
came as a fellow.
Yeah, nobody gives up their day job,
yeah.
I want you to know. But
So
that's,
it's a really mixed cohort of people, but it's really inspiring.
And Susan, the other thing that I love about it is that it's not the usual suspects. When we had the Yale project,
Right.
we used to bring we had 15 people on our editorial advisory board, and we would bring them together once a year. We'd meet in New York around a big table, and everybody sat there very augustly, and talking about which books should be translated and picking them out and assigning the translations. Now, we don't do any of that. Now the younger people, the new translators themselves, go onto our Spielberg library, our online collection. They look at books that nobody's looked at in 80 years or 50 years or 30 years. I mean, everything's there. And they kind of evaluate it for themselves, what's great and what's not. And so the books that are coming out are books we barely knew existed. And we walk through these stacks, a zillion times a day, and we barely knew these books existed. It's changing the whole field.
Right. So I think, one of the other piece of this is we wanted to, who's going to publish these books? So we decided at the same time to try to build our own publishing venture, and we started White Goat Press, and Lisa Newman, who does everything, is also heading up White Goat Press for us.
Lisa's kind of the Eleanor of our staff. She does a lot of these roles here. So,
And if you heard her talk this morning, she talked a little bit about White Goat Press. Our newest publication is Dina, which is a new translation of a work by Ida Maze, who is best known for her poetry. People didn't really know she had a novel. Yirmiyahu Aaron Taub translated this book.
He's a cataloger, a Judaica cataloger at the Library of Congress, and this is what he does in his spare time.
And it's just an example of the new work that's being discovered and the works that we're going to be putting out. You're going to see a lot more of these in the years to come. Yeah. But it really is quite exciting.
Yeah, it's thrilling. Can I show the glass
plates
while we're at it?
Show the glass plates as well.
All right. I won't talk at length about this because we have a limit.
Too many stories to,
Yeah, the trouble when you're doing a lot in an organization, you need a lot of time to talk about it, But we're very proud of this book called The Glass Plates of Lublin. Has anybody seen it already? Well, it turned out in the city of Lublin, most of the major cities of Poland were 1/3 Jewish before the war, which is astonishing. Baghdad, by the way, was also 1/3 Jewish before the war. And almost every major city in Ukraine was also 1/3 Jewish before the war. We kind of forget these things. But in the city of Lublin, which Warsaw was sort of leveled, but Lublin was mostly left standing. And in one of the old buildings there 10 years ago, an architect had gone into the attic where they were doing some renovations and found a big pile of dirt and junk up there. And sticking out of it, he saw there were these little glass pieces sticking out. And they looked like 4x6 index cards, more or less. And they were glass negatives, not like the Matthew Brady kind of glass negatives. This was technology that was used, between 1913 and 1930. And when they looked more closely, they were pictures mostly of Jewish life in Lublin during that period, 1913 to 1930. So you've probably all seen the Roman Vishniak pictures, but Roman Vishniak took those in the late 30s. But he was already chronicling a world which was almost gone at that point. Jews were mostly modern by that stage of the game. So he was finding these old Jews with the long beards and the long coats, and the Talmud under their arms. But he had to kind of airbrush out the telephone wires and the automobiles because it was a modern world in which they lived. The photographer of these photographs, there were 2,700 of these glass negatives. And there's a wonderful institution called the Bramogrodska, the city gate. It started as a theater company, became a cultural institution. It was the old gate that back in the 14th century had separated the Jewish and Christian sections of the city. And they took this on as a project to preserve all of these materials. They meticulously restored them. And then Lisa ended up working with Piotr Nazaruk, who was their curator. And they picked out, Lisa, how many, 160 or so? 160 of the best photographs. I mean, it's impossible to pick the best, but of these 2,700 of these, and put this extraordinary book together. And the reason I mentioned Vishniak is Vishniak was trying to create chronicle a world that didn't quite exist anymore. This photographer was a commercial photographer who had absolutely no preconception and no political agenda whatsoever. He was just taking pictures, and they're magnificent. Photographically, they're magnificent. But also ethnographically, they're astonishing because they just show life in a rather unadorned way. And it's an amazing chronicle, and it's got a good deal of press, and we hope it'll get a lot more. So we're very proud of that.
And you can buy it in our store. A little shameless plug. So I want to, since we really are going to run out of time, I do want to segue to education, and I want to talk about that in a particular way. So we, for years, have been running what we consider sort of our flagship program, our Steiner Summer Yiddish program, which is still, it's an incredible program. You saw many of the students dancing in the aisles over this weekend. We bring in 18, 20 students every summer. They learn Yiddish intensively. They take culture courses. It's fully immersive, and we're very proud of that program. But, and we started some years ago a program for high school students that we call Great Jewish Books, which was a way to introduce rising college juniors and seniors not just to Yiddish, but to the world of Jewish literature, to open up this world. I mean, even kids going to a Jewish day school wouldn't read Jewish literature. It's modern Jewish literature. They might, you know, they have religious education, but they wouldn't be introduced to some of the greatest writers in modern Jewish literature, let alone Yiddish literature. So they come here for a week, they take a deep dive into this literature, and you know, they're completely wowed by it. And it's also very exciting because many of those students have now gone on to become Steiner students and gone on to become
fellows,
and fellows. But we also realize that, you know what, these are wonderful programs and we're going to keep doing them, but we can't bring that many people here. You know, you know, that's a program of 36, 48 high school students. The college program is 20 students. These programs are important and valuable, but we wanted to create leverage in the same way that running the translation initiative sort of sends people out into the world to go translate. We wanted to find ways to leverage. How can we reach more people with the content that we want to bring into the world? So we started a program some years ago to train teachers, a Great Jewish Book Seminar for teachers. We had a major grant from the Jim Joseph Foundation. Day school teachers came here for a month and took a deep dive into the content.
And were blown away intellectually by what they discovered. You know, they really didn't know modern Jewish literature existed. This sounds preposterous, but it's simply the way it was. For a long time, you had a better chance of encountering modern Jewish writers in a public school classroom than in a Jewish school classroom. So we're hoping to change all that, and now we started a new program for rabbis, which I love. I love it, you know, because once again, these are people who can really make a difference. Think how leveraged this is. You know, they have a big audience back home that they can then bring this literature to. And I just want to acknowledge that the two real founders of this program who funded it for many years are with us today, and that's Walt and Arnie Winchell. You two just stand up. I know you're shy, but just stand up for 1 second. Wave your hand at least. They have masks on, so you're not going to recognize them anyways later on. But Walt and Arnie, thank you. Really, it was visionary, and we're very grateful to you for that. So
yeah. So and another way that we're thinking about leverage these days is we launched a program a couple of years ago for public libraries. This is another way of bringing Yiddish literature out into the world. We started it right before the pandemic, and we're about to launch our second iteration of it has just been announced. We partner with the American Library Association to publicize a program for public libraries whereby they apply to us to run reading groups around Yiddish literature. The librarians come here for a workshop, and then they go back to their communities. They run reading groups. We give them resources around the books, and we're providing public programming for them, and it's just another way of bringing the content to an audience that would never otherwise know about it. And we're doing it around themes that we hope will have broader resonance. This year, the program is called Stories of Exile. So the idea being that, look, so many of the stories in our literature are about exile. They're about displacement. Stories of displacement, I think it's called, actually. And we're connecting it, so they get 3 books. We send them copies of 3 books in Yiddish literature that relate to that theme. And they have to pick a book that relates to a community in their area, a similar story. So the last time it was immigration stories, and we had people picking books about, you know, Vietnamese immigrants or you know, Puerto Rican immigrants, or, you know, a way of making, you know, connecting this to a universal story, but also telling the particular tale.
Yeah. I think if anyone was at the concert the other night, with Paul Shapiro, and you saw that kind of cultural interaction there, and you saw the incredible strength of merging and fusing cultures like that, the exact same thing happens with literature and with literary conversations. So I think that was a wonderful model for us in a lot of ways.
It was,
and
absolutely.
It was really energetic.
It was.
And these programs are too, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Susan's too modest to tell you this, but she's also the chair of the Council of American Jewish Museums. And in that capacity has also been able to make connections with Jewish museums all over the country. Because these are all institutions that have collections and have content, but don't always have people to come to get there, you know. And so it's been wonderful to work with other institutions. We really love the idea of consortial relationships and of making partnerships and finding ways to join forces.
So another way we've been trying to do that, again, around our 40th, which unfortunately fell during the pandemic, we were launching a new initiative that we were calling the Decade of Discovery. And the idea behind that was to create and have a new theme every year, put out a bunch of programming around that theme in partnership with organizations around the country. We had a program planned in Chicago with the Chicago Writers Museum. We had a program planned in LA. We had a program planned in New York, Miami, and of course, what happened? None of those things could happen. We did a lot of those programming online. This year our theme has been Women in Yiddish, which if you've heard the talk that our David Mazauer, our bibliographer, who many of you know, our fabulous bibliographer and co-curator of the new exhibit that we're going to be opening in next year at this time, he talked a lot about how a big part of that exhibit is trying to tell stories that haven't been told. And, you know, Women in Yiddish is a story in many ways that hasn't been told. So the theme this year was Women in Yiddish. Next year, it's Yiddish as a global culture, which aligns with both our new exhibit that's opening, and the goal is just to talk about the many ways in which Yiddish is truly a global culture, and many people don't know those stories. But actually, I'll go back to Women in Yiddish because we're doing a fabulous program in the fall that I want you all to know about. It's going to be a weekend program here at the Yiddish Book Center, the weekend of November 3rd, 4th, and 5th, I believe. And it's called De Freuen, Celebrating Women in Yiddish. And I don't know if you want to just preface that.
It actually commemorates the 25th anniversary of a conference that had been held kind of when people first discovered women in Yiddish literature. And there was a conference to explore that 25 years ago. And here we are 25 years later, where I'd say a significant number of the translations we're publishing now are by women. And I think that oversight is being rectified very quickly right now. And so it's a celebration and an exploration of
And it's a great opportunity to have people come back here. And we will live stream some of it, but it's going to be an incredible weekend. And for those of you who like coming here for the weekend and for a deep dive into a fascinating topic, I'll encourage you to all come to that.
I told Susan the other day we were cleaning out our house, and I came upon the brochure of a program that had been put on here at the Yiddish Book Center on Yiddish and women in Yiddish literature in 1991, long before the 25, the program that we're commemorating. But even so,
nonetheless.
It was, we've been at this for a while, but it's a story that very much needs to be told. You know, the one thing you see from the music here this week, which is really, this weekend has been unlike anything I can remember, any Yidstock I can remember. Just not only the depth of content, but the inventiveness of it all. The ways in which this content is being transmuted and serving as a foundation, a touchstone for new creativity has just been dazzling, I think, to all of us. I think we're all amazed at it. Just the evolution of it as well has been really dazzling. And the truth is, we sit right now, literally right behind us, underground here. The treasures are vast, and they're sort of, they're so varied in terms of literature and music and theater and radio and culture in every possible way. And bringing this all out into the fore, all we have to do now is just sit back and watch and see what happens.
It's so true. But I want to...
Except we don't do too much sitting back and watching.
No, there's not a lot of sitting back. But I will ask one final question. There's so much more we could talk about, but I'll ask one final question, and then we'll take questions from you. And, in some ways in this audience, we're talking to the converted. I think most of you are convinced that this is important. But I'll ask the question anyway, which is, a question I sort of posed when I gave a talk a few weeks ago to a congregation out in New Jersey. Why does this matter? Like, why should people care that we're opening up these books to a new generation?
Yeah, you're not the first person to ask me that question in recent days.
Yes.
Did any of you see was it CBS?
CBS.
The CBS TV thing on us. It was what was the show called?
CBS Saturday Morning.
Right, CBS Saturday Morning. Sorry. And we don't have a television set, so I'm a little out of the loop here. But CBS Saturday Morning, they sent a very good reporter, a former anchor here to the name something. And they spent 2 days here to report about what's happening at the Yiddish Book Center. They were so into it, they even had a drone that they flew over the stacks to get these really cool aerial shots within the building. And we have beams that are laser beams that go across the smoke detectors, so they had to dive in and out of the beam. Anyways, it was quite an event. And at the end of all that, to go back to your question, the interviewer, who was actually very perceptive and quite terrific, and he said to me, asked me the very same question. He said, so why are you doing all this? What's this all for? And my spontaneous answer was just that because culture matters. And I think after the pandemic, culture matters more than ever, and I think we're all beginning to discover that. You know, I think many of us, this room is obviously people who care deeply about learning and culture and intellectuality, but the truth of the matter is, as a society, you know, we had drifted very much more towards consumerism and very much less towards culture, I think, over the years. And you know what, genug schön. Really, I think we've all come to realize that this is going to require a little bit of retooling right now if we're going to gain our balance and save democracy and save the planet and so forth. And as I said at the very beginning of this program, you know, Jews have lived on the outside for a really long time. We're really good at this. And we've been at it for a long time. We've created vast literature about the outsider's experience, and I think all of that has more to say right now than ever. So that's how I would answer you.
I agree, and I'll also just add that I think one thing that always inspires me when I meet the people who come through our programs, our education programs, whether they're high school students or college students or 20-somethings, is that, you know, what we offer them, and, you know, it's not... the content that we open up for them inspires them to some of them may go on to a life of academic work or other professional work in this field. That's wonderful. But others of them, they'll just bring it into their lives. You don't have to be an academic to appreciate why understanding and engaging in Yiddish language and culture is meaningful and valuable. For many young people, this is their first experience coming into a Jewish space where they feel accepted and they feel like there's other ways of identifying as Jewish in ways that they had never considered before. So, you know, I also think that is, for me, it's always very inspiring to read the comments of the people who come through the programs and the ways in which they find new meaning and new connection and new ways of understanding what it means to be Jewish, whether they're Jewish or not, understanding what it means to be Jewish by engaging and connecting to this content.
Yeah, so Susan and I have like the best seats in America right now because we really do we don't sit very often, but we really do. We kind of have a front row seats to a real transformation in American and Jewish life right now. And you know, the pandemic has been hell. It's been horrible. People have suffered. People have lost family members. You know, everything about it has been bad. But some of the changes that come out of it may be positive in the long haul. So I don't know where I sit. I'm feeling very optimistic right now.
Aaron is one of the most optimistic people I've ever met in my life, which is why this place exists and why it is what it is. So maybe this is a good moment for us to take questions.
Open the floor.
Yeah.
Tell us who you are, though, and where you're from.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Do you find that there are some non-Jewish, non-Yiddish groups around the world who have a similar situation where they've lost a certain amount of culture for whatever reason, and then they say, hey, look what these guys in Massachusetts are doing. Why can't we do it?
Yes, we've actually had people approach us over the years. There was an Armenian culture center in Watertown outside of Boston, approached us at one point. Certainly there are American Indian groups, Inuit groups that are very, very interested, not having approached us directly in terms of books, but the whole enterprise of kind of cultural and linguistic reclamation. I think there are many people very deeply concerned about this. UNESCO has been working on that as well. So the answer is yes, and we're very happy to help everyone. I want to add one other piece to it. It's not only other peoples, but also other languages. You know, Jews are a very creative people, and over the years, we've picked up elements of all sorts of different languages and made Jewish tongues out of them. So there are probably anywhere between 18 and 20 different Jewish languages. You know, Hebrew is one, Aramaic is another, Yiddish is one, Ladino is another, but there are many, many, many other languages like this. And not all of them created great literatures or large literatures, but some have literatures. And we're very eager to work with them. We've worked with Devin Nair, professor of Ladino studies, Judaismo studies at the University of Washington. And I went out there to talk with him about his efforts to collect Ladino books, of which there are about 5,000 different titles of modern Ladino literature. There's a lot out there altogether. So yes, and I just want to say, we tend to be by nature rather magnanimous. We'll work with everybody. You know, we love the idea of working with others, and we try to be as helpful as we can to anybody who comes to us.
Okay, I'm sorry, Aaron, I had
Please.
called on somebody else. Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Colette Lynn, and I spoke Yiddish before I spoke English. And I was wondering if I could work as a translator of the Yiddish books.
So we do have we don't hire translators. We have the fellowship where you apply to be a student, but we do have a list of translators. We have people approaching us all the time asking us, they want this translated, they want that translated, and we don't offer to do that, but we have a list of translators and we connect people to translators. So I'll take your information at the end and we can be in touch about adding you possibly to that list.
That'd be
Wonderful.
Someone literally approached me today, handed me a letter written in Yiddish while I was buying my falafel. There's a real need out there, and we would love that.
David, yes?
Yes, just quickly on that, there is the Jewish Den website, Jewish Genealogy, which is looking for volunteer translators all the time, especially to help translate the memorial books of
Yes.
Central and East European communities. You could also consider contacting them.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. In the back there. That's you.
Yeah, my name is David Miller. I guess Israel, Cambridge, Berkeley is the best thing. And I'm here initially as homage to my mother, who's not in this world anymore, but she came here many years ago. She was a Yiddish speaker. I'm not, so I can never understand why I should come, but, I get it. That's how it works. My question is about something you said. You combined your question with 3 or 4 other global institutions, I guess, in terms of getting what you feel is the vast majority now of Yiddish extant text, right? So I'm just wondering, is one of those the National Library in Jerusalem?
Yes.
It is, yes, very much so. And we love them. They are wonderful partners, and they're very sophisticated technologically. And they actually undertook part of the everyone's doing pieces of this, of course. But before we could get started, we had to have what they call a National Union Catalog. So there was a single catalog that could coordinate all our records so we can figure out what's been scanned and what hasn't, for example. And the Hebrew University, which became National Library, going back as early as the 1920s when Judah Magnus was organizing this, they made the decision to catalog all of their books in Hebrew, regardless of the original language. So the Yiddish books are sort of were cataloged in Hebrew. It made it very, very difficult to merge records. We even sent it off to the Mormons in Utah at one point to get them to help us reprogram this, and they couldn't do it. But the National Library undertook to create a Yiddish Union catalog. They did this entirely on their own, and they have now completed it. And that's a very valuable tool. It makes everything else possible.
So they're one of the key partners. It's the National Library of Israel, YIVO in New York, and the New York Public Library are the current partners, and we're bringing in a couple of other partners as well.
I promise you'll be impressed with the new ones, too, but we can't say who they are yet.
Yep.
So, yeah, okay.
Okay. Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so many people. So many questions. I'm going to go all the way in the back. We'll get to all of you. Yeah.
We are in touch with Yad Vashem, and we certainly cooperate with them. They have large Yisca book collections, for example. But Yad Vashem is more archival collections, as far as I understand it. And that's sort of beyond our purview. When we do get archival materials, we send them on to other institutions.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that, we often have programmatic ideas and we'll say, oh, this is an institution we'd like to work with, and we'll contact them. I mean, we're always open to having, if Yad Vashem has a great idea of something they'd like to do in concert with us, we'd be thrilled to do it. There's always challenges in trying to partner and figuring out where you're aligned and so forth and so on. But
Yeah. David, am I correct? Do they have extensive book collections at Yad Vashem?
I honestly don't know. I imagine they must have some, but you're right.
It's mostly
Archival.
an archive.
Yeah.
They certainly have the means
And we're very much in touch with them in that sense, so yes.
Yes, go ahead, in the front.
Yes, my name is Arlene Barrow. I'm married to Carol Barrow. I was very happy and excited to find on the internet the first book I ever had to learn Yiddish out of for my 7th birthday. The name of the book was Lola.
Lovely.
I don't know the book, though. There was an artist named Lola. David, who is he?
His name was Leon Israels, and he was a cartoonist and a sketcher for the Yiddish press. He went under the pen name Lola.
Yeah, maybe.
This was a children's book.
Yeah. We did make a bibliography some years ago of all the Yiddish children's books. There were over 1,200 of them. And many of the greatest Yiddish writers, Shalom Aleichem, even Bashevis, all wrote books for children as well. For an obvious reason, they were very concerned about the future and about continuity, and they therefore, you don't get that in English. I don't think Faulkner wrote too many books for kids, but in Yiddish there were many, many writers did that. So.
Yes.
John Pfeffer. We just moved here to Hampton. One reason was Yiddish books. There are other ones. It's certainly your institution, which has done an amazing job with preserving the past. And my question is, what about the creation of new Yiddish culture? Obviously, Yidstock is one example of that, but novels like Michael Chabon's Yiddish
Policeman's Union, yeah.
Well, the Great Jewish Books program is one way of supporting an interest in modern Jewish literature of all sorts, from Sholem Aleichem up through, Michael Chabon and other contemporary Jewish writers. The other thing, a program that we have had for many years, we're not running currently, but I would love to start it up again if we had the funding, is a program. We ran a program for Jewish novelists, Jewish writers. It's sort of a workshop type program. It was called Tent Creative Writing, and it became, for several years, the place, if you were a writer, a novelist who considered themselves a Jewish writer, this was like the workshop to come to. And so we did that for years. We partnered with PJ Library around children's books. We worked with, we ran a workshop for children's book writers and illustrators.
Yes, theater
so,
and...
yes,
yeah.
we had a program for theater and comedy. So, and in fact, I was just talking to Eleanor Reza today because, to me, what we do for Yidstock, look, capacity is an issue, funding is an issue, of course. We're not a big organization. I've been saying lately that we're small but mighty, but we're only so mighty. I mean, I have all kinds of ideas of how I would like to foster new creativity, because I think that you look at an artist like Josh Dolgan or an artist like Anthony Russell, who are creating whole new things out of this content, and they wouldn't be able to do it if they didn't have a deep connection and learning in the content, as opposed to, creating sort of Jewish art that isn't based in some authentic content. I don't mean to disparage anybody, but I'm really respectful of these people who are just diving in and really learning the content, and I would love to be able to find ways to continue to foster that. So, stay tuned.
And we have big aspirations.
Yeah.
And, I believe firmly that no new creativity can spring up ex nihilo. To have great literature in English, you had to know Shakespeare before you. You had to know Chaucer. You had to, this is simply the way that the world works. It's the way human creativity works. That each generation builds on the works of the next. And Jewishness has always been a process of accretion of texts, starting with the Torah and the Talmud and going on and on. I mean, this is always who we have been. And modern Jewish literature is part of that same process, and it's critical. And it's, we need to get it out there, though. I also want to say something that is probably apparent, but I think it might need saying. We're not your grandparents' Yiddish organization. We're not Yiddishists in the sense that we don't believe that Yiddish is the end-all of Jewish life. We believe that what happened in Yiddish, the language that 80% of the world's Jews spoke for 1,000 years, was an absolutely critical chapter in Jewish history. It wasn't the beginning and it's not the end, but it's a critical chapter and needs to be studied and embraced and integrated back into mainstream Jewish education. But the ultimate aspiration is much larger than that. It's how do we create a vibrant and creative and constantly reinventing, Jewish identity in a modern world. And I agree with Susan. I think that all of what we have found here, all of the books you've helped us collect, that's the raw material from which the future will be built. But we got to get people to read them first and learn them. And so, oh, I forgot to tell you one other thing that happened.
I was going to say
during
that's the perfect way to end.
It would have been, poetically, it would have been perfect, but I have to just mention one more thing. It's not just us who are teaching Yiddish these days. You know, teaching Yiddish became a boom industry during the pandemic. Duolingo, it's an online app. I guess all apps are online, right? It's an app that came out to learn Yiddish. They claim they've had 500,000 people sign up for it. That doesn't mean 500,000 people are actively learning Yiddish right now. But the fact that even close to that is astonishing. It just shows what kind of pent-up energy there is and what pent-up, kind of hunger for this is out there. So the release of our textbook was very auspicious timing. We didn't mean to take 8 years to do it, but it's auspicious because now when people use an app like that and it whets their appetite to learn more about Yiddish, then the book is waiting for them for a more in-depth dive in the way people actually learn languages, more intensively. So we really are trying to create a vibrant contemporary Jewish culture, and everything that came before is are building blocks for that, and that's part of why we're here.
So I mean, I know there are more questions, and maybe we can chat a little bit, but I think we're at time, and Aaron, thank you.
Susan, thank you for that, but I want to, since we're both sitting on the same stage, I really have to add that the Book Center would not be the organization it is today if you hadn't joined us 12 years ago, Susan.
Thank you, Aaron. That's very generous of you.
Well, it's not generous, it's just true. And so really, I thank you with all my heart.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
We're done.
we're done.